I was already running late when I saw the bus waiting at the end of the block. The sign above the windshield was dark, no number lit up, no route flashing. For a second I thought it was out of service, but the doors were open, and in my exhaustion I didn't care enough to second guess it. The street around me was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavier than silence, just the distant hum of traffic 2 avenues over, and the occasional hiss of wind moving trash along the curb. I jogged the last few steps and climbed on. The driver didn't look at me when I swiped my card. I heard the beep, but he didn't nod, didn't glance up, nothing. Just kept his eyes fixed forward, hands loose on the wheel, the glow of the dashboard lights painting his face in sickly green. His skin looked waxy in the dimness, but I told myself it was just the bulbs. I didn't think much more about it. The bus interior smelled faintly of damp cloth, like old coats after rain. The seats were patched with duct tape in places, and the thin strip of yellow lights overhead flickered once before stabilizing. I moved toward the middle, noticing only a handful of passengers scattered through the rows. A woman near the front sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, staring straight ahead. A man in the back leaned against the window, motionless, as though he'd been carved into place. None of them made eye contact. No one even shifted when I walked past. I slid into a seat 2 rows behind the woman, pressed my backpack against my legs, and exhaled. My day had already been hell. Missed trains, a double shift, a supervisor who seemed to take pleasure in nitpicking every move. All I wanted was the half-hour ride home to myself, a dark room, maybe leftover takeout if it hadn't gone bad. I told myself I was lucky the bus had shown up at all. I'd never seen one without a number before, but maybe it was one of those temporary replacements filling in for a broken-down vehicle on the regular route. The bus lurched forward, smooth but heavy, like it was pulling too much weight. I pressed my head back against the seat and let the vibration of the engine hum through me. My eyelids sagged almost immediately. It was only when we rolled past the first stop without slowing that I noticed something was off. At first, I assumed no one had pressed the cord. The little yellow strip along the ceiling didn't light, no chime, no sign. Maybe nobody needed to get off. But when the second stop slid by in a blur of dim street lamps and cracked pavement, my stomach gave a small twist. Someone usually got on there. At this hour, always. People leaving late shifts, students trudging home, smokers stepping off for their last pack of the night. The shelter was empty, and the bus kept moving, steady as a heartbeat. I glanced toward the driver. His face was tilted toward the road, completely still. The woman in front of me didn't stir. The man in the back didn't either. Neither of them looked toward the windows or shifted as the stop slipped by. I thought about pulling the cord myself, testing it just to make sure it still worked, but I didn't want to look paranoid. My fingers twitched against my bag instead. The engine hummed deeper as we turned down another avenue, one I recognized. At least it was heading in the right direction, I told myself. Maybe the driver was skipping empty stops tonight. I tried to remember if that was even allowed. The air inside the bus felt thicker than it should have, as though the windows were sealed shut. I adjusted in my seat, trying not to pay attention to the ache creeping into the back of my head. Something about the silence was getting to me. It wasn't just that nobody was talking. It was that nobody was making noise at all. No coughs, no shifting jackets, no feet tapping. Just the low drone of the motor, steady and constant. I shifted my gaze down the aisle, trying to catch someone's eye. The woman's posture never changed, her back straight, her hands folded like she was waiting for something solemn. I couldn't even hear her breathing. I turned quickly, scanning the man in the back. His head leaned against the glass at a rigid angle, like he'd frozen halfway through a sigh. His eyes were open, I thought, though it was hard to tell in the dim light. I rubbed my face. I was tired, that had to be it. Everything was a little strange when you were running on fumes. We passed another stop, then another. The dark glass of the windows reflected the dim yellow lights inside, distorting my own face into a stretched, half-lit smear when I glanced at it. I pulled my gaze away immediately, not wanting to linger on the warped image. The street outside rushed by too fast for me to register detail, and the dim sodium lamps looked identical, each one a marker in an endless sequence. I shifted again, tried to relax. The bus had to stop eventually, but when we glided past the next shelter, a lit one, with a man standing there holding a grocery bag, my skin prickled cold. I sat up straighter. The man didn't move as the bus passed. He didn't raise his arm, didn't step forward, didn't shift his weight, just stood there as though rooted to the spot, the bag dangling from his hand. His face never turned. He didn't even seem to register us passing. I craned my neck to look back, but the shelter had already slipped into darkness. I swallowed hard and sat back, pressing my spine into the seat. My throat felt dry. I leaned forward slightly, looking toward the driver. He hadn't shifted once since I'd boarded. His face was locked in that forward tilt, his hands hanging from the wheel at a casual angle. From where I sat, I couldn't see him blink. I thought about calling out. My lips parted, but the air in the bus pressed against me, heavy, discouraging. The words stuck. The woman in front of me moved. Not much, just the slow rise and fall of her shoulders like she'd taken a breath. I focused on it, absurdly relieved. At least someone was alive, I told myself. She had to be. But her head never turned, her eyes stayed locked on the space in front of her. The bus rolled on. My nerves kept ratcheting tighter with each block until I couldn't sit still anymore. I stood, gripping the rail, and walked carefully down the aisle toward the driver. My footsteps sounded too loud in the still air. "Excuse me," I said, my voice breaking the silence like a stone through glass. The driver didn't move. "Hey, can you let me off at the next stop?" Nothing. His posture didn't even twitch. I reached out, hesitated, then knocked against the plastic barrier separating the driver from the aisle. The sound was swallowed instantly. No echo, no hollow knock, just a flat thud, and then silence again. The driver didn't turn. My skin prickled. I slowly withdrew my hand. Behind me, I thought I heard the faint creak of a seat shifting. I turned quickly, but the aisle stretched empty. The woman sat as still as before, the man in the back motionless. But something had changed. I counted the passengers again, slowly, my gaze moving seat to seat. I could have sworn there had been more. The bus hummed on, passing another stop without slowing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with my counting. The first time I'd glanced down the rows, I remembered at least 6 or 7 people scattered across the seats. Now, staring again, I could only pick out the woman in front of me and the man at the back. Maybe one more, farther up on the opposite side, half hidden by the shadow near the window, but I couldn't swear to it. The longer I stared, the less certain I became. I forced myself to sit again. My knees felt weak, and I didn't want to be the one pacing around the aisle like some paranoid idiot. I sank into the vinyl cushion, pressed my bag into my lap, and fixed my gaze on the streaks of yellow light outside. Another stop drifted by, the shelter empty this time. A rusted bike was chained to the signpost, front wheel bent like a collapsed knee. The bus didn't slow. I realized I was holding my breath until the shelter passed completely, and I let it out in a shaky exhale. This wasn't right. I rubbed my forehead with the heel of my hand, trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Maybe the bus was express, skipping certain stops. Maybe the display above the windshield had glitched out, and the driver just hadn't bothered fixing it. That didn't explain the passengers, so still, so mute, but exhaustion could warp anyone's perception. If I'd fallen asleep for even a minute, I might have lost track of how many people I'd seen. The woman in front of me adjusted her hands slightly, fingers folding together tighter, but her gaze didn't shift. I waited, watching, but that was all she did. No glance to the side, no scratch of her cheek, no clearing her throat. Just that tiny adjustment, then nothing. I gripped the seat in front of me and leaned over it slightly. "Hey," I whispered, low, as if afraid to disturb the silence too much. She didn't respond. I cleared my throat and tried again, louder. "Excuse me, do you know if this bus stops anywhere?" The sound of my own voice made me flinch. It cut too sharp through the air, like it didn't belong inside. She didn't answer, didn't even twitch. The hair on my arms rose. I sat back, heart thudding harder, and pressed my eyes shut for a moment. I told myself not to panic, not to lose it. It was just a bus ride, just a bus. When I opened my eyes again, another stop was already behind us. That one had been familiar. I knew the corner store that sat across from it, the flickering neon sign half dead in the window. I knew the cracked sidewalk where I'd nearly twisted an ankle last month. This was my route. I should have been able to get off blocks ago. I pressed the cord above my seat. The little black strip gave under my fingers with a soft click. No ding, no light, no sign lit up at the front. I pressed it again, harder. Nothing. A cold sweat gathered at the back of my neck. I stood once more, gripping the railing to steady myself, and walked briskly to the front. I planted myself beside the driver, leaning slightly into the barrier. "Hey," I said louder now. "You passed my stop. Can you let me out at the next one?" The driver's head didn't turn. His eyes were fixed ahead, hands still resting loosely on the wheel. Not gripping it, just resting. His knuckles didn't even tighten as the bus turned a corner. I slapped the barrier with my palm. "I'm talking to you. Hey." The sound was dead, muffled. The bus didn't slow. A thin line of fear threaded through my chest. I pressed closer, straining to catch any sign of breath from him, any subtle shift of his shoulders. Nothing. I backed away slowly, retreating to the middle of the bus. My heart beat too hard, too fast, the echo of it drowning out the hum of the engine. I turned to look at the other passengers again, desperate for some grounding reassurance. The man at the back was still there, his head pressed against the glass at that unnatural tilt. His reflection in the dark window looked pale and blurred. I waited for him to blink, to shift. He didn't. The shadowy figure I thought I'd seen on the far side was gone. The seats were emptier now. I rubbed my eyes, dizzy with a sudden wave of disorientation. I couldn't tell if the rows had always been this bare, or if people really were disappearing. How could I not have noticed them get up? How could they just be gone without movement? I turned back toward the front, swallowing against the dryness in my throat. The woman was still there. She hadn't budged. She might have been a mannequin for all the motion she made. The bus rolled smoothly, no jerks, no hesitation. It passed another stop. This one wasn't empty. Two people stood waiting beneath the weak glow of the shelter lamp, a man and a woman, side by side, not speaking, not even looking up as the bus glided by. "Stop!" I shouted, lunging toward the front again. "Stop the damn bus!" My words hit the air and vanished, swallowed whole. The driver didn't move. The two figures outside grew smaller, fading into the blur of the street until the lamp's glow vanished behind us. I gripped the rail hard, my hands slick with sweat. I felt trapped, not just physically, but in some deeper, heavier sense, as though the entire space of the bus was sealing tighter around me. I staggered back to my seat, almost falling into it. My bag slipped from my lap and thudded against the floor, the sound dull and muted. I bent quickly to grab it, grateful for the motion, for something physical and real to focus on. When I straightened, the woman in the seat ahead of me had shifted again. Her hands weren't folded anymore. They were pressed flat against her thighs, fingers spread rigid. Her shoulders hadn't moved, her head hadn't turned, just her hands, stark against the dark fabric. I pressed myself back into my seat, pulse racing. I couldn't keep my eyes off her, waiting for her to twitch again, to show any sign of normal human motion. She never did. The bus turned another corner, steady and silent. My mind raced through every rational explanation it could scrape together, but they all fell apart. Express bus? Impossible. This was a local route. Faulty cord? Maybe, but the driver had to hear me shouting. Dead tired hallucinations? I wished. I pushed up again, gripping the rail, my voice cracking as I called out, "Can anyone hear me?" The man at the back didn't stir. The woman in front of me didn't breathe. The empty seats stretched wider in my mind, each one a reminder of someone who should have been there. The bus hummed on, blind to everything. I sat frozen in my seat, my hand still clutching the strap of my bag as though that tether could keep me grounded. My mouth was dry, my pulse loud in my ears. The bus rolled smoothly, steady as a conveyor belt, pulling me forward through a city that was starting to look less and less like the one I thought I knew. Street lamps came and went in perfect rhythm, the same pale yellow glow, the same patches of cracked pavement beneath them. The more I stared, the harder it was to spot anything unique about them. No graffiti, no potholes, no storefronts I could place. Just repetition, block after block, stretching endlessly ahead. I tore my gaze away from the windows. I didn't want to look at the outside anymore. Instead, I forced myself to look again at the passengers. I had to. Something in me needed to know I wasn't alone in whatever this was. The woman in front of me still hadn't moved her head. Her profile was sharp in the half-light, her chin slightly raised, eyes fixed on some invisible point straight ahead. I leaned slightly, trying to catch the reflection of her pupils in the window, but the glass was too dark, too smeared with light from inside. I shifted back, unsettled by the thought of my own reflection mingling with hers. I counted silently, timing the rise and fall of her chest. 1, 2, 3, nothing. I leaned forward slightly, straining to detect any rhythm at all, but if she was breathing, it was too shallow for me to see. I swallowed hard and turned, shifting my gaze down the aisle. The man in the back was still in the same position, head pressed against the window at that crooked angle, cheeks squashed slightly, mouth slack. His eyes were open, I realized now, definitely open, though they didn't shine with moisture or blink against the dim light. They were fixed, unchanging. A chill crept down my spine. I forced myself to look farther down the bus. A figure sat maybe halfway between us, across the aisle, pressed tight against the window. Their coat was pulled up high, the collar stiff, hiding their chin. Their head was tilted slightly downward, but what made my stomach lurch was the hands resting neatly in their lap, fingers clasped tight together, not shifting even as the bus rattled faintly over a rough patch of road. The longer I stared, the more it felt like I was looking at posed mannequins, like someone had placed bodies here for effect, arranged them neatly in their seats and left them. I dug my nails into the seat fabric, telling myself to stop, to breathe. People on buses zoned out all the time. People slept, people sat stiff. But this stillness, it wasn't the kind of rest you saw on tired commuters. It was something locked. I shifted uneasily. My legs wanted to move, to keep pacing, but I knew if I stood again, it would feel like the air itself was pushing back against me. Instead, I tried again to speak. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice low, controlled. "Anyone, do you know where this bus is going?" My words echoed back to me, empty. None of the passengers reacted. I clenched my fists. "Ma'am," I tried again, louder this time, leaning toward the woman in front of me. "Do you know when the bus stops? I need to get off. Please." The sound landed, sharp in the stagnant air, but she didn't move. I stared at the back of her head until my vision blurred. No shift of her neck, no twitch of her shoulders, no flicker of acknowledgement. I sat back slowly, hard hammering. The bus kept moving. I turned back toward the driver. His head was still frozen in that slightly forward tilt, hands resting like paperweights on the wheel. His jacket collar brushed the bottom of his jaw. His skin, if it even was skin, looked dull, without sheen. I gritted my teeth and shifted my attention back to the aisle, trying to count again. 1, 2, 3. Just 3 others besides me. That had to be right, but the certainty slipped even as I repeated it to myself. I could have sworn I'd seen more when I first boarded. I could have sworn. I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumb trembling slightly as I flicked the screen awake. No bars, not even a faint searching icon. Just a dead flat line. I tried anyway, typing out a message to a friend. On the bus, something's wrong, can you call me? I hit send. It failed instantly. The light from the screen illuminated my lap, casting the rows of seats into shadow. I lifted it slightly, using it like a flashlight, and shone it on the woman in front of me. Her hair caught the glow faintly, strands reflecting dull brown. The skin at the back of her neck looked pale, too pale and rigid. The phone's light showed no rise, no fall. I snapped the phone dark again, chest tightening. I couldn't keep staring. The hum of the engine seemed louder now, pressing against the walls of the bus, filling my head with static. I realized my knuckles were white where I gripped the seat. I forced myself to relax, only to clench again immediately when the bus breezed past another stop. This one wasn't empty either. A man in a hoodie stood there, shoulders hunched, a backpack slung over one side. He didn't glance up as the headlights washed over him. He didn't raise a hand. He just stood there, posture stiff, as though waiting for something that wasn't me. The shelter lamp illuminated his face for an instant, and my stomach twisted. His eyes were open too wide. His jaw hung just slightly slack. He looked like he was already waiting somewhere else, locked in place. And then the bus passed, and he was gone. I turned sharply, looking to the other passengers again, desperate to see some hint of recognition, some flicker of life. The man in the back was still staring through the glass. The woman hadn't shifted. The third figure near the window hadn't lifted their head. I wiped sweat from my forehead with a shaky hand, every detail pressed tighter against me, the silence suffocating. I caught myself staring at their hands, the woman's flat palms, the figure's locked fingers, the man's slack arms. None of them twitched when the bus tilted slightly into another curve. None of them braced or adjusted. I pressed my nails against my palm until they hurt, until I could feel something raw and real against me. I whispered to myself under my breath, just tired, just a bus, just tired. The hum of the engine didn't waver. The lights overhead flickered, once, a brief stutter, then returned. I looked up in time to see another stop blur past. I wasn't sure if I had imagined the figure waiting there or not. The rhythm of the ride was hypnotic, almost punishing in its steadiness. The wheels hummed against asphalt like a metronome. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, and nothing else broke the pattern. I kept my eyes fixed on the passengers, convinced if I looked away for even a second I'd miss something. I stared at the woman directly ahead of me until my vision blurred. My eyes watered, and I had to blink, but I fought the urge. I wanted proof, any proof, that she was real, that she belonged to the same world as me. But she didn't move, not once. I dragged my gaze back down the aisle, squinting toward the back. The man was still slumped against the glass, face slack, eyes open. His reflection glowed faintly in the window, a dull duplicate that didn't quite match the tilt of his head. And the other figure, the one near the window across the aisle, sat just as before, collar raised, head dipped, hands fused together like clay. I counted them again. 1, 2, 3, not including me. The bus swayed slightly on a curve. My balance shifted. My shoulder brushed the cold glass of the window beside me. When I steadied myself and looked forward again, the seat across the aisle was empty. I froze. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Empty. The figure that had sat pressed against the window was gone. No coat, no hands, no shadow, just vacancy. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the seat in front of me and half rose, peering down the aisle. No one had stood. No one had walked to the front. I would have heard it, seen it. There was no sound of footsteps, no hiss of doors. The bus never stopped. The seat was empty. My heart lurched against my ribs, a painful thump. I twisted toward the back, staring at the remaining man. He hadn't moved. His crooked head was still mashed to the window, his eyes unblinking. I whipped back toward the woman. Her hands were still pressed flat against her thighs. Her head was still raised at the same sharp angle. But now it was just the two of them. I slumped back into my seat, clutching my bag like a shield. My mind reeled, looping through the same desperate explanations. I could have missed it. Maybe the figure had gotten up silently while I was rubbing my eyes. Maybe I was too tired, so tired I was skipping frames like a broken film reel. Maybe. But the certainty grew heavier. They hadn't left. They hadn't moved at all. One moment the seat was occupied, the next it was empty. I pressed the heel of my hand hard against my forehead, trying to steady my thoughts. My breath came too fast, ragged. The bus kept moving. Outside, the lamps passed in their endless rhythm, one after another, their pools of light identical. I stared at them for a moment, hoping for distraction, until nausea swirled in my stomach from the repetition. I turned back quickly, fixing on the rows of seats again. The woman in front of me was all I could see, rigid and still. I felt a sudden, irrational fear that if I blinked too long, she too would be gone. I leaned forward slightly, the fabric of my seat creaking. "Ma'am," I whispered, my throat tight. "Are you there? Can you hear me?" My voice sounded smaller this time, like it was being swallowed before it reached her. She didn't stir. I reached a hand forward, trembling slightly, and hovered it inches from her shoulder. The air felt thick there, charged. I wanted to shake her, to prove she was flesh, but I couldn't bring myself to touch. The bus jolted slightly on another turn. I pulled back quickly. When I glanced at the back of the bus again, my stomach dropped. The man was gone. The seat by the window was empty. His crooked reflection vanished. I hadn't turned away for more than a second. The bus had jolted, I'd pulled back, and in that sliver of time, he was gone. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. My breath came shallow and fast as I gripped the rail for balance. My eyes darted frantically across the rows, empty. Just the woman in front of me, everyone else, gone. I stumbled down the aisle, peering at each seat as though one of them might still be hiding there, crouched low, but they were bare. The vinyl cushions stretched in unbroken lines, glowing faintly in the dim overhead light. My pulse roared in my ears. I staggered back toward the center of the bus, bracing myself against the cold steel poles. I forced myself to turn slowly, eyes dragging across every row, desperate to find someone, anyone, still there. Only her, the woman, still upright, still rigid. I forced myself to speak again, louder this time, nearly shouting, "Where did they go? Where are they?" The words bounced back hollow. She didn't react. I let my back slide against the pole until I was half sitting on the floor, my legs shaking. My hands fumbled at my phone again, as though anything would be different. Still no signal. The dark screen reflected my face, pale and stretched, my eyes wide. I shoved it back into my pocket, unable to look at it. I pressed my hands to my knees and forced slow breaths, each one trembling. When I looked up again, the bus had passed another stop. A man stood there in the shelter, grocery bag at his feet. He didn't look up, he didn't move. He stood exactly as the others had, waiting, fixed. His eyes didn't follow us. The shelter's light flickered once as we passed, like a bad bulb, and then darkness swallowed him whole. I twisted back toward the woman, panic flaring sharp. She was still there, still rigid, but for a moment I thought her head had tilted slightly farther back, just a degree, enough to make my stomach knot. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to will myself calm, but the image burned behind my lids. When I opened them again, the seat directly ahead was empty. I froze, my lungs seizing. The woman was gone, no movement, no sound, just gone. I stumbled upright, nearly tripping over my bag. I whipped my head left, right, as if she might have shifted aisles, crouched down, something, anything. But her seat was bare, blank, an empty void. I turned desperately toward the front. The driver was still there, hands resting on the wheel, head tilted. The dim glow of the dash painted his jawline in green. The rest of the bus was empty. My body felt hollow, every nerve firing at once. My breath rasped against the silence, filling it like static. The emptiness pressed around me, every seat a reminder of someone who had been there just moments before. I staggered backward, collapsing into the nearest seat. My legs felt numb. The bus rolled on. I couldn't breathe right. The silence around me was so complete it felt like it was inside my lungs, choking every inhale. I pressed my palms hard into my thighs to stop the shaking. My eyes darted from seat to seat, but the emptiness was unbearable. Every single one that had once held someone was vacant now, their absence heavier than their presence had ever been. I surged to my feet. My knees nearly buckled under me, but I gripped the nearest rail and forced myself steady. The aisle yawned wide and empty, stretching toward the front like a throat. The driver's still silhouette loomed there, unmoving, while outside the windows only that same endless blur of lamps and asphalt repeated. I lunged for the cord again. My fingers pressed down so hard I thought the plastic would snap, but no ding sounded. No light flickered at the front. I dragged my hand along the strip, pressing it in every seat I passed, frantic, as though sheer force or repetition could force the system awake. Nothing. No acknowledgement. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice cracking against the air. "Stop the bus! Stop now!" The words echoed back at me, strangely muted, as though the air itself refused to carry them far. The driver didn't flinch. I rushed toward the doors, nearly stumbling as the bus tilted slightly into another curve. I planted myself before them, slamming the heel of my hand against the bar that should have signaled the doors to open. I shoved, yanked, beat my fists against the cold panels. They rattled faintly but didn't give. "Open! Open, damn it!" I shouted, striking them again and again. My breath fogged faintly against the glass, though the night outside looked no colder than the dim interior. I pressed my forehead to it, eyes straining into the darkness. Street lamps blurred past in their mechanical rhythm. Sidewalks ran endlessly alongside us, but something was wrong with them. I realized after a moment. They were all the same cracks in the same pattern, the same tiny weeds pushing through the same breaks in the concrete. I tried to trace the storefronts we passed, desperate for recognition, but they repeated too, washed in the same glow. A diner with a broken sign, a liquor store with blacked-out windows, a laundromat with a red door, then again, a diner with a broken sign, a liquor store with blacked-out windows, a laundromat with a red door, again. My stomach lurched violently. I staggered back from the door, gripping the railing to keep from collapsing. I turned toward the front, wild now. "Do you hear me?" I shouted at the driver. "You have to stop. You can't keep going like this." Nothing, not even the twitch of a shoulder. I half ran down the aisle, stumbling as the bus swayed again, and slammed my hand against the plastic barrier near him. The hollow thud felt absorbed instantly. I pressed my face close, straining to see the outline of his jaw, the faint reflection in the side glass. He looked like a doll left propped in place. I forced my hand toward the door separating us, fingers trembling. I slammed it twice. It didn't open. My chest burned, panic crawling sharp across my skin. I turned and ran back down the aisle, stopping again at the center doors. I yanked at the bar, pulled so hard my arm muscles ached, but the hinges didn't so much as groan. I tried kicking, once, twice, the sound dull and unsatisfying. The glass didn't even crack. My legs gave way under me, and I collapsed against the cold panel, gasping. The vibration of the engine thudded into my spine, relentless. I tried to calm myself, pressing my palms flat against the floor, my thoughts scattered, unable to cling to anything. I was trapped, and the bus kept moving, and I didn't know if there was even anywhere real outside anymore. I pushed myself shakily to my feet, needing to see. I stumbled back to the windows and pressed my face close, breath fogging again. The diner's broken sign flashed past. the liquor store's dark windows, the red door of the laundromat. Over and over, like a reel on repeat. I counted. 1 sequence, 2, 3, each loop identical. I backed away from the glass, stomach twisting. I turned toward the empty seats again, desperate for something human. They stretched in endless rows, each vacancy a weight. I almost wanted one of the still, silent figures to be there again, even if they weren't right, even if they didn't move, even if they weren't real, anything but the blank emptiness swallowing me now. I staggered to the rear doors. These had no bar, no mechanism for me to push. I slammed my fists against them anyway, screaming hoarsely. My voice sounded like it dissolved the second it left me. The doors didn't shift. The humming engine droned louder. I turned toward the back window, pressing both palms against it. Outside stretched the same road. No intersections, no cross streets, no change. The sequence looped endlessly, and we were locked inside it. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sharp, but I blinked them away. I didn't want to lose focus. I couldn't. I forced myself back up the aisle, hands shaking as I reached the driver again. My chest heaved as I shouted directly at him, slamming the barrier until my palms ached. "What are you doing? Where are you taking me? Stop." His posture was rigid, head angled slightly toward the road, hands limp on the wheel. His face was too still. I thought for a moment, just for a heartbeat, that I saw his lips part. I leaned closer, straining, my whole body rigid. Nothing. Just that waxy stillness. I stumbled back, my own breath shaking louder than the engine hum now. I looked down the aisle again, toward the endless stretch of vacant seats. The emptiness pressed heavier, as though the whole bus was collapsing inward. I grabbed the nearest pole, forcing myself to stand straight. I couldn't stay frozen. I couldn't let the silence smother me. I yanked the cord again, harder this time, dragging it so far I nearly tore it loose. No response. I tried every section of it, moving seat to seat, clicking and pulling until my hands shook. Nothing. The bus rolled on, indifferent. The diner flashed. The liquor store, the laundromat, over and over. I pressed my palms against the cold glass, whispering to myself without realizing it. "Let me out. Please. Please let me out." The engine hummed. The lights buzzed. The bus didn't stop. I lost track of how long I stood gripping that pole, staring at the repeating streets outside the window. My fingers were stiff, locked around the metal until they ached, but I didn't loosen them. If I did, I thought I might slip out of myself entirely, fall into that blank loop outside. At some point, I turned, and for a second my heart jolted because the bus wasn't empty anymore. 3 rows ahead, on the left side, someone sat slouched against the glass. I blinked hard, convinced my mind was making it up, but when I opened my eyes again, the figure remained. A jacket hood pulled low, arms limp in their lap. Another sat across the aisle from me, maybe 2 rows down. I hadn't seen them when I'd swept the seats before. Their shape was distinct now, shoulders sharp beneath a pale shirt, head tilted down as if studying the floor. My throat tightened. They hadn't been there. They couldn't have been. But I couldn't look away. Slowly I moved down the aisle, steps hesitant. My shoes thudded softly against the vinyl, too loud in the suffocating air. I stopped beside the nearest one, the figure in the pale shirt. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling but louder than I meant. "Please, can you hear me? Do you know what's happening?" The figure shifted, their head lifted slightly, just enough for me to glimpse a jawline in the weak light. "Sta, sta, sta." The sound came in broken fragments, like a skipping record. I froze. "What?" My voice cracked. "Say it again. What did you say? Stay sane." The syllable fractured and cut off, looping into static. Their lips moved, but the sound didn't match, slurred and incomplete. Their head dipped again, motion jerky, mechanical. I stumbled back a step, bile rising in my throat. My hands trembled violently at my sides. I forced myself to look across the aisle toward the hooded figure pressed to the window. "You," I said desperately, voice cracking higher. "You can hear me, right? You know what's going on? Tell me." The hood twitched. A jaw shifted inside the shadow. "Gone," a voice rasped, stretched thin and hollow. Gone. My pulse thudded in my skull. "Gone where? What does that mean? Who's gone?" "Gone," the voice echoed flatly, splitting into 3 identical tones, all slightly off from each other, layering like feedback. "Gone. I clutched the pole nearest me, my knuckles bone white. "Stop it! Stop saying that! Tell me what's happening!" The head under the hood jerked slightly, as though something inside had tugged it, but no other sound came. I whipped back toward the figure in the pale shirt. Their lips still moved, syllables slipping out like broken tape. Stay. I pressed my hands to my temples, dragging in a breath sharp enough to burn my throat. I turned again, scanning frantically. Another shape sat near the back now. I could have sworn it hadn't been there before, but it was real, slumped against the last row, half-shadowed. I stumbled toward it, desperate. "Please," I rasped. "Please tell me where this bus is going. Please tell me how to get off." The head lifted sluggishly. Eyes opened, glassy, too wide. No. The words spilled out like water dripping from a pipe, each repetition jagged and uneven. I staggered back, colliding with the seat. The figure leaned forward slightly, arms dangling loose. Their lips formed the word again and again, the sound flat, stripped of meaning until it was just noise. I backed away until my shoulder struck the wall. My breath heaved so loud it hurt. The 3 figures remained where they were, their fragmented sounds weaving into each other. Stay gone, no, stay gone, no, blending into a warped chant that filled the hollow space. I pressed my palms over my ears, but the sound seeped through anyway, as though it was in my skull itself, bypassing everything. "Stop," I whispered, rocking against the wall. "Stop. The voices sputtered suddenly into silence. I lowered my hands cautiously, chest heaving. The bus hummed as steadily as ever. I looked down the aisle again. The figure in the pale shirt was gone. The hooded figure was gone. The slumped shape at the back was gone. Only empty seats stretched before me. My chest collapsed inward. My breath shuddered out in a soundless cry. I stumbled back to the middle of the bus and collapsed into the nearest seat, burying my face in my hands. My body rocked without rhythm, every muscle drawn tight. When I looked up again, the driver was still fixed in his frozen posture, his head tilted just so, his hands limp on the wheel. The bus rolled through another sequence, the diner's broken sign, the liquor store's dark windows, the red laundromat door. I couldn't tell anymore if it had been 5 loops or 50. I don't know how long I sat slumped in that seat, breathing into my hands, waiting for another sound. My ears rang faintly, an afterimage of the broken voices that had filled the bus. The silence that replaced them was worse. It was thick, deliberate, like a weight pressing into me. When I finally forced myself to lift my head, the bus was empty again. I scanned every row, forcing myself to look closely this time, each seat in turn, my eyes darting left and right. Nothing. No hooded figure, no pale shirt, no slumped body at the back, just the empty vinyl, gleaming faintly under the yellow strip lights. It wasn't just that the passengers had disappeared, it was that I had known they would. I clutched the edge of the seat to steady myself and pulled myself up. My legs shook, heavy and uncooperative, but I made myself move down the aisle. My shoes slapped against the floor in dull, deadened thuds. The driver's silhouette loomed ahead. Every nerve in me screamed not to get closer, but the emptiness of the bus gave me no choice. I couldn't sit back there alone anymore. The air seemed thicker at the front, heavier with each step I took. I gripped the poles as I passed them, leaving sweaty prints on the cold steel. My throat tightened with every inch of progress until I stood just behind the driver's seat, staring at the back of his head. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling, weaker than I wanted it to be. "Do you hear me? I'm the only one left. You have to stop, please." No answer. The wheel shifted slightly under his hands as the bus tilted into another curve. His knuckles didn't tighten, his fingers didn't flex. It was as though the motion of the wheel passed through him, like he was just a placeholder for hands. I leaned closer, close enough that I could see the faint sheen of the dash lights brushing the underside of his jaw. The skin there looked wrong. Not quite flesh, not quite plastic, like wax left too long in the sun. The pores were too smooth, the lines too shallow. "Look at me," I whispered, breath shaking. "Please, just look at me." Nothing. His head was angled slightly downward, locked in the same tilt, eyes fixed somewhere just past the windshield. I pressed my palm against the clear divider, the plastic cool beneath my skin. "Why won't you answer?" I rasped. "Why won't you let me off?" I tapped the divider once with my knuckles, then harder. The sound swallowed instantly as it always was. No echo, no vibration through the bus, just a dull thud that vanished into the air. My throat burned. I forced myself to glance at the wheel again, to study the faint way the lights caught his skin. "Are you even driving?" I asked, voice ragged. The words were too loud. They hung for a moment, suspended, before thinning into nothing. I pressed my forehead to the divider. The plastic was clammy, colder than it should have been, like it was leaching heat from my skin. My eyes blurred as I tried to focus on the faint outline of his face, the curve of his cheek, the hollow of his jaw. And for the first time I realized I couldn't see him breathe. No rise of his shoulders, no shift of his chest, nothing. My stomach dropped. I jerked back from the divider, heart lurching painfully against my ribs. The bus hit a rough patch in the road, rattling faintly, but the driver didn't move. His hands didn't tighten, his head didn't shift. I staggered back a step, then another, nearly tripping into a seat. I wanted to run to the back to put distance between us, but the emptiness behind me felt worse. Every row of seats was a hollow mouth yawning open, waiting for me to step back into its silence. So I stayed where I was, halfway down the aisle, caught between two voids. My gaze darted back toward the driver. The lights reflected faintly in the glass of the windshield, but beyond it, the road stretched on in that same repeating rhythm. Diner, liquor store, laundromat. Again. "Please," I whispered, my voice breaking. Just stop the bus." The words died in the air. I clutched the seat beside me, the vinyl slick against my damp palms. My knees trembled. Every part of me wanted to scream, to pound the walls, to force some acknowledgement from him. But the silence pressed tighter with every second, suffocating me. I forced myself to take a shaky step forward, then another, until I stood directly behind him again, staring at the back of his head. My hand lifted before I could stop it. Trembling fingers hovered inches from his shoulder, the air there thicker, charged, as though it resisted me. My breath came fast, shallow. I lowered my hand slowly. I couldn't touch him. I slid down into the frontmost seat behind the divider instead, every muscle rigid, staring at the frozen outline of his jaw. I waited for him to move. Minutes passed, maybe longer. The bus kept humming, the wheels kept rolling. The sequence outside repeated like a metronome. The driver never twitched. At some point, I realized I was whispering again, words spilling from me without thought. "Please stop. Please just stop. Please. Please." The lights overhead flickered once, faintly, then steadied. I stared at the driver's reflection in the windshield. For the briefest moment, it didn't match. My chest seized. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, he was still. I gripped the rail beside me, fingers aching, and forced myself to breathe. I couldn't keep sitting. I had to know. Slowly, deliberately, I leaned forward until the divider nearly touched my face. I strained my eyes, focusing on the back of his ear, the angle of his jaw, the faint stretch of his cheek. No pores, no hair, no breath. I swallowed hard, and my voice rasped out, barely audible. "What are you?" The engine hummed. The bus rolled on. I don't know how long I sat in that front seat, staring at the unmoving silhouette of the driver. Every second I waited for some flicker of life, the faint lift of his shoulders with breath, a twitch of his jaw, the shift of a hand on the wheel. Nothing. The longer I stared, the more impossible it felt to keep sitting idle. The hum of the bus gnawed at my nerves, drilling into the back of my skull until the sound was unbearable. My pulse matched it, hard and uneven. I had to know. I rose slowly, gripping the metal bar beside the driver's compartment. My knees wobbled, but I forced my weight forward until I was standing directly over him. The plastic divider threw back a faint reflection of my face, pale and stretched, hovering above his still head. My hand lifted again, trembling uncontrollably. This time, I didn't stop. I pressed my fingertips against his shoulder. The instant I touched him, I recoiled. He was solid, but not in the way flesh is solid. His jacket was stiff beneath my fingers, the shape beneath it harder than bone but lacking any warmth. My skin prickled violently, and I snatched my hand back as though I'd touched an electrical current. I stood frozen, staring. The bus hit a shallow dip in the road, rattling the frame, but the driver didn't shift at all. His head remained angled in the same position, his hands loose on the wheel. If not for the faint reflection of the dashboard glow across his jaw, I could have sworn he was carved from stone. I forced myself to lean forward again. My fingers trembled as I reached for his arm this time, brushing the fabric. The sleeve resisted slightly under my pressure, too rigid, too unyielding. I pressed harder, and the give was unnatural, almost spongy. "Move," I whispered, my throat raw. "Please, just move." Nothing. I slid my hand down his arm, desperate, until my fingertips brushed his knuckles on the wheel. They were ice cold, rigid. I pressed down. The wheel shifted beneath both of us, turning slightly as the bus angled around another curve, but his hands didn't tighten, didn't grip. The wheel moved through him. The engine hummed louder, as though mocking me. "No," I rasped, my chest tightening. "No, no, no." I shoved harder against the wheel, both hands pressing until my shoulders strained. For a heartbeat, the bus tilted sharper than before, the headlights swerving across the repeated storefronts. My stomach leapt with hope. I could control it. Then the resistance hit. The wheel jerked back against my palms as though something deeper than mechanics had seized it. My arms strained, every muscle shaking, but the harder I pushed, the more the resistance grew. The bus groaned faintly in protest, and I thought I heard the faintest hiss, like breath exhaled from somewhere behind the dashboard. I yanked my hands back, panting, and stumbled 2 steps away. The wheel straightened itself smoothly, the driver's rigid hands resting loosely against it. The bus slid back into its rhythm without a tremor. The diner's broken sign appeared again. The liquor store. The red laundromat door. I clutched my head, fingers digging into my scalp. My breath came fast, shallow, burning my throat. The driver wasn't driving. The bus was moving on its own. I staggered back down the aisle, away from him, my vision tunneling. The rows of empty seats gaped at me like hollow sockets. I couldn't stay near him. I couldn't stand the thought of that waxy stillness inches from me, that mockery of life pretending to guide us forward. Halfway down the bus, I collapsed into a seat, chest heaving. My arms shook violently. The engine hummed steady as ever. The lights overhead buzzed. The world outside looped and looped. I pressed my palms over my eyes, desperate to block it out, but the memory of that rigid, unyielding body burned hot in my nerves. He wasn't human. He couldn't be. My mind clawed at any explanation it could find. A mannequin, a corpse, some grotesque construct placed in the seat to give the illusion of a driver. Whatever it wasn't alive, and the bus didn't need him anyway. I lifted my head slowly, staring toward the front. His silhouette sat motionless, perfectly framed by the divider. The dash lights glowed faintly across his cheek. I remembered the faint hiss I'd heard when I fought the wheel, not a mechanical sound, a breath from somewhere deeper. "No," I whispered again, my voice ragged. "You're not real. You're not driving this." I lurched to my feet, staggering toward the rear doors this time, fists slamming against them again. My voice cracked into screams. "Stop! Let me off! Let me off right now!" The doors didn't budge. The windows showed the same street, the same impossible repetition. I slammed my fists until they throbbed, until my throat tore with the force of my cries. My body trembled, drenched in sweat, but nothing changed. Finally, I slid down against the cold panels, my breath rattling out of me in broken sobs. The bus hummed, steady and endless, carrying me forward whether I wanted it to or not. I don't know how long I sat there at the rear doors, sweat cooling on my skin, my fists aching from pounding against the panels. My throat felt raw, torn open from shouting into silence. My body trembled with exhaustion, but the bus didn't care. It rolled on, humming steady, carrying me further into whatever this was. When I finally dragged myself upright, the world outside the windows had changed. At first I thought it was a trick of my eyes, blurred from tears and fatigue. The sequence I'd memorized, the diner's broken sign, the liquor store, the laundromat door, wasn't there anymore. Instead, the lamps outside were farther apart, their pale light stretching thinner, spilling over pavement I didn't recognize. The sidewalks looked cracked in jagged, unnatural patterns, more like dry riverbeds than city streets. I pressed my forehead to the glass, blinking hard. The bus surged forward through emptier blocks, spaces where storefronts should have been but weren't. No neon lights, no graffiti, no signs of life at all. Just blank buildings with faceless windows, their walls dark and flat, as though no one had ever been inside them. The lamp posts themselves looked wrong now. Too tall, too narrow, bending slightly at the top like warped stalks. The bulbs flickered with a weak bluish tint, casting a color I'd never seen in city lights before. It made the concrete gleam slick and oily. I staggered up the aisle, my legs heavy, and pressed to another window farther forward. The view didn't change. More of the same emptiness, block after block of structures that weren't buildings so much as shapes, like the suggestion of a city sketched without detail. A low sound crawled out of my throat, halfway between a sob and a laugh. I backed away from the glass, shaking my head. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I turned toward the driver, desperate for any anchor, but he remained still, waxen hands resting uselessly on the wheel. The dash lights painted his jaw the same sickly green, and his head stayed locked in its tilt. I spun back to the window. A sign passed by, large and rectangular, bolted to a pole. Relief surged in me. I could read it. I could know where I was. But when my eyes locked onto the letters, my breath stopped. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I knew. The letters twisted in sharp angles, looping curves and broken strokes that bled into each other. My brain strained to parse them, desperate to assign meaning, but every second I stared only made them more alien. They rearranged themselves in my mind, shifting, unreadable. Another sign passed, smaller this time, same markings. Another, farther down the block, glowing faintly with that bluish lamplight. Same impossible script. I stumbled back into a seat, clutching the pole beside it. My stomach heaved, my skin crawling. It wasn't my city anymore. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to breathe, but the hum of the bus pressed into me, relentless. My thoughts unraveled, threads pulling apart one by one. I opened my eyes again, needing to see, and immediately wished I hadn't. The road outside wasn't concrete anymore. The lamps stretched farther apart, the pavement between them blacker, smoother, reflecting the headlights like wet glass. It ran endlessly forward, without cracks or markings. No crosswalks, no manhole covers, no signs of wear, just a perfect gleaming stretch that bent slightly downward as though sloping into nothing. My stomach dropped with a sensation of descent. I gripped the edge of the seat until my fingers throbbed. The buildings, if that's what they still were, thinned out, shrinking into dark silhouettes. They looked less and less like structures and more like jagged teeth rising from the ground. No windows now, no doors. Just outlines against a void sky. The bus tilted gently, humming deeper, as though pleased. I lurched to my feet, stumbling down the aisle, unable to sit still with that view outside. My eyes darted wildly between windows, hoping one of them might still show something real, something mine. Nothing. Every window showed the same alien road, the same warped lamps, the same unreadable signs flashing by. "Stop," I whispered hoarsely. "Please, just stop." The bus didn't. I lunged toward the driver again, slamming my fist against the divider. My voice cracked as I screamed at him. "Where are you taking me? What is this place? Stop the bus. Stop it now." His head never turned. His hands never tightened. The waxy skin reflected the same glow, indifferent. I slammed the barrier until my palms burned, then collapsed back into the front seat, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Outside, the road bent again, sloping sharper. The lamps grew taller, their light more distant, until the bus moved through longer stretches of pure darkness. In those gaps, I couldn't see anything at all beyond the glass, just blackness pressing tight against the windows, infinite, crushing. Every time a lamp flared back into view, relief shuddered through me, only to drain instantly when I saw the alien script etched on the signs beneath them. One sign loomed larger than the rest, glowing brighter. For a moment, I thought I saw the faint shape of a human figure standing beneath it. But when the bus drew closer, the figure wasn't human. It was taller, stretched thin, its limbs wrong. Its face, if it had one, was a pale blur turned toward the road. I staggered back from the window, bile rising in my throat. The bus never slowed. The figure vanished behind us, swallowed by darkness. I collapsed into the seat, covering my face with both hands. My body rocked with the motion of the bus, every sway like the heartbeat of something too big to fight. We weren't in the city anymore. We weren't anywhere I knew. The hum of the engine deepened, steady as breath, and the road stretched endlessly forward. I don't know when the slope of the road leveled out again. At some point, the descent became a steady stretch, the lamps rising taller, farther apart, until their light looked less like city fixtures and more like the faint glow of towers half buried in shadow. The alien script on the signs blurred past too quickly for me to study, but I didn't need to. I knew by now that none of it would ever resolve into meaning I could hold. I sat slumped against the front seat, my eyes dry from staring too long, my throat a raw ache. The driver's silhouette loomed inches away, but I didn't look at him anymore. He wasn't real. He had never been real. The hum of the bus deepened suddenly, a vibration that shook through the floor and into my bones. My head snapped up. The lamps outside vanished altogether, swallowed by a vast blackness. For the first time since I'd boarded, the bus slowed. I lurched upright, clutching the rail for balance. My heart hammered in my chest as the vibration underfoot grew heavier, shuddering with each second. The headlights pushed into the darkness, illuminating nothing but a flat stretch of pale ground, smooth and endless, like stone polished too clean. The engine's hum wound down into a groan. The wheels hissed faintly. The motion softened. The bus came to a stop. My breath caught. The sudden silence beyond the engine was unbearable, so heavy I thought my lungs would collapse against it. I turned toward the driver, desperate for any sign that he might finally move, that he'd break the silence. His head stayed tilted, hands limp, waxy jaw painted green. The doors hissed. I flinched as they folded open, metal grinding faintly. The sound echoed into the vast dark outside, swallowed almost instantly. Cold air swept in, sharper than any wind I'd ever felt, carrying no scent at all, just emptiness. I stared at the open doorway, my body rigid. Nothing waited outside. No street, no city. Just the flat, pale ground stretching endlessly, vanishing into black. Every instinct screamed not to move, to stay inside, even here. But the longer I hesitated, the clearer it became. The bus wasn't going to take me anywhere else. The driver wouldn't turn. The seats behind me wouldn't fill. The world outside the windows would never be mine again. My legs shook violently as I stepped into the aisle. I clutched my bag to my chest, my fingers digging into the straps until they ached. I forced one foot forward, then another, each step heavier than the last. I reached the doorway and froze, staring down at the pale surface below. It wasn't pavement. It wasn't stone. It was too smooth, too seamless, stretching in every direction like the skin of some vast, endless plain. The hum of the bus rattled behind me, urging me forward. I stepped down. The ground was cold under my shoes, colder than the air, a chill that climbed instantly through my legs and into my chest. I staggered a few feet away, my breath ragged, and turned back. The open doors gaped at me, spilling the dim yellow glow of the interior into the dark. For a second, I thought I saw movement inside, the faint suggestion of figures in the seats again, but when I blinked, the bus was as empty as before. The doors closed with a sharp hiss. "No," I whispered, stepping forward, reaching a trembling hand toward the glass. The headlights flared brighter. The engine groaned. The wheels rolled. The bus pulled away, its glow shrinking across the pale expanse until it was only a pinprick in the distance, then gone. Silence swallowed everything. I stood alone on the endless flat, my breath loud in my ears. The black sky stretched overhead without stars, without a moon, without depth. The ground beneath me was too smooth, too perfect, no cracks, no breaks. I turned slowly, staring in every direction, but there was nothing. No buildings, no lamps, no signs, just me, alone, stranded where the bus had left me. The cold deepened, creeping through my shoes, through my legs, through my chest. My arms shook violently around my bag. I pressed it tighter against me, though it meant nothing here, though nothing I'd carried could help. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound died instantly, absorbed into the air before it left my lips. There was no echo. I was nowhere, and the bus wasn't coming back.